This is a presentation on the literary review of Deja Vu conducted in 2003. A literary review is a combination of all existing publications in the academic world on a subject. They're usually pretty long, so this video will be a surface-level overview of his extensive research. Nearly everyone can look back on a time when they felt deja vu, but how do we actually define it? For a long time, this was a subject of debate in psychology. The origin and definition of this phenomenon are hard to pin down. The current definition is something like you're in a situation that you've never been in before, but yet you have this weird feeling of familiarity. We're going to reference a literary review published by Alan S. Brown in 2003. He compiled all of the existing studies on the subject at the time and combined them into one paper. He begins by going over some definitions of deja vu from previous psychology textbooks. You can pause to read these. According to existing data, which I have to say is limited in its scientific validity by today's standards, 2/3 of the population will experience deja vu in their lifetime. Of this proportion, many are likely to experience it more than once, and a significant number of participants report experiencing it as often as once a year. Instances of deja vu seem to decrease with age. As you can see in this chart on the right, reports peak around early adulthood and rates generally lower from there. The only exception to this relationship is the low rates of deja vu reported in teenagers, which we'll get back to. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to comment on the data. Brown is reviewing scattered studies from decades of research on deja vu, including a significant number of studies that were published before the strict standards of scientific reporting that we have today. This is an important thing to keep in mind because although their studies may have included averages and statistics that Brown comments on, the raw data was not included in many of these reports. That means that any calculation errors, confounding variables, or other possibly skewing factors could be influencing the data. They were not included in the study, so they cannot be identified. Brown was careful to keep referencing this fact throughout his entire review. So let's take another quick look at that graph from before. You can see that with age, experience, or people who report deja vu drops dramatically. But if so many people experience it in their 20s, shouldn't the same amount of people still report that they have experienced it in their 60s? It makes sense that the number would remain flat or increase, but it decreases. Does this mean that people are experiencing deja vu and then forgetting it? Not necessarily. Brown found that in recent years, deja vu has become much more widely accepted and believed. He theorizes that older generations haven't forgotten about their deja vu experiences, they just come from a time when they didn't believe in it. If they did have a deja vu experience, they probably either didn't have the words to identify it or didn't believe that it was anything too far out of the ordinary and pushed it out of their mind. But what about teenagers? If there is such a low proportion of teens who report deja vu, does that mean that it can only occur after a specific developmental level is reached? One that maybe comes in early adulthood? Brown found that several studies suggested that these cognitive structures necessary for producing deja vu are not yet in place until 8 or 9 years of age. They also claim that deja vu is something people only experience after hearing about it, which for many wouldn't happen until the mid-teen years. Deja vu is not correlated with gender. Some studies have found disproportionate rates, but overall findings are mixed across decades of research. Men or women don't experience deja vu more than the other. Brown found a positive relationship between education and social class and deja vu reports. That is, those who are more educated experience more instances of deja vu. The reason that he says the correlation is for both education and social class is because the two are highly connected to each other, and it's difficult to separate the groups to reach an uninfluenced result. This may also be related to our next slide, which discusses some of the potential causes of deja vu. Stress and deja vu are positively correlated. This is supported by a majority of the studies that Brown reviewed, which included a few reports from samples of soldiers going into battle. It was also correlated with unfamiliar situations, fatigue, and travel, which may be related to the upper class correlation from last slide, as upper class people often travel more. Brown also referenced a study that found a striking correlation between deja vu and dreams. The results from a two-question test, the questions being, have you experienced deja vu, and do you remember your dreams? 100% of the population that answered yes to remembering their dreams had also reported experiencing deja vu. Deja vu is still not fully understood by the field. Three of the most likely explanations that Brown found in his review of existing studies in 2003 are listed here. The first has to do with the conflict between two lines of thought in the brain. Say you are going on a trip to Seattle for the first time. When you step into the airport, you get a sense of deja vu. One line of thought in your brain, the one that logically knows you've never been here before, is conflicted because of a second line of thought, your feelings of familiarity. This may come from plenty of different factors. Maybe you saw this terminal in a movie. Maybe a different airport you visited before is set up in the same way. Another possible source is the slowed communication between neurons, which respond using electrical and chemical impulses. The sense of weirdness, familiarity, and general feeling of being off could be due to the incomplete or untimely firing of neurons. Finally, Brown references another possible explanation, which is that the processing of your surroundings might be passive or absent-minded, and suddenly your awareness is brought to full attention. Deja vu is still fundamentally misunderstood. These are educated guesses about why it happens, but it's important to keep in mind that many of these sources would not be considered valid by today's standards. As research progresses, a focus on representative sampling, careful data collection and reporting, and control groups to rule out confounding factors is important. If you'd like to learn more, here is the source from 2003. Thank you.